Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Professor Kamel Hawwash, who is a Palestinian academic and analyst who is based in Birmingham in the United Kingdom and joins us now. Thank you so much for speaking to us once again, Professor. I just want to start by asking you what your understanding is about what has happened during what appear to have been 3 consecutive days of chaotic aid distribution in Gaza. What happened?
Well, first of all, this is supposedly Israel's way of replacing the distribution of aid through UNRWA and other organizations that has gone on for years because it accuses Hamas of stealing some of the aid. Instead of that, it has colluded with America, and I say that because they're not working for the Palestinian people, to have some distribution points in the southernmost point of Gaza, i.e. nearly at the border with Egypt, that there would be something like 4 distribution points instead of the 400 that were there over the whole of the strip in the past. So squeezing people in who are hungry, people have no choice but to go and get their aid from wherever it's available, whether it was dropped from planes, and as you know, some were crushed by the packages that came down, or they were promised that there would be a sort of a seaport to drop it in. They'd go wherever the food is. So they went in huge numbers because there are 2.3 million Palestinians. They tried to get their aid. Now, I haven't seen pictures that show this, but the claim from organizations on the ground is that on each of the days, a number of Palestinians were killed, sort of averaging about 20 or 30 a day, who had just gone to get some food. And the accusation is that the group that targeted them was the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. So that's my understanding of what happened. People who went to get food for their families as well. There were fathers who didn't come back, who went to get some food, and they were killed by the Israelis where they were supposedly meant to be safe and just receiving aid.
Israel has disputed your version of events, not specifically about today, but the Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell says that she's seen a drone footage filmed in Khan Yunis on Sunday, which she says shows armed, masked men firing at civilians attempting to collect aid. What do you make of that? Could that be true?
First of all, it wasn't my version, if I may. It was the version of people on the ground who said, aid organizations and so on, that this happened. Secondly, this lady is a habitual liar. I've seen her on a number of occasions dispute everything and blame everything on the Palestinians or Hamas. Secondly, I haven't seen this footage that she keeps talking about. It's a bit like the footage which they claimed showed 40 beheaded babies on the 7th of October, which turned out to be a complete lie. I do not believe anything that Israel says, and I say to them, why won't you allow independent journalists to enter Gaza and to report from there? And the reason, of course, is they don't want anyone to see the atrocities. If it wasn't for the bravery of the TV reporters and journalists, the Palestinian ones in Gaza, we wouldn't have known anything about what goes on the ground. Because Israel hasn't allowed independent journalists in. The only journalists who go in are accompanied and directed by the Israeli Defense Force. And it is interesting that they haven't taken anyone to this new distribution point. Clearly, they're worried that they might record things that they don't want them to record. So everything that comes out of Israel is a total lie, and I do not exaggerate.
What's your thinking about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? I mean, clearly they don't have much experience on the ground in the same way that, for example, UNRWA does. What do you make of their intentions?
Well, first of all, it's Israel and America's intention to control everything. They claim, as I said, that they want to stop aid going to Hamas. Even the group that you mentioned that supposedly they claim fired on Palestinians, those gangs are protected by the Israeli army. And in talking to my friends in Gaza and in Ramallah over the last few days, absolutely they completely confirm that these gangs are protected and have been organized by Israel. In fact, only a couple of days ago, there was a statement from a family in Gaza which disowned their own son, and I'm really sorry I can't remember the name, but for leading one of these criminal gangs, and they are criminal gangs. So it's all part of wanting to change facts on the ground through these plans. This company, as you say, has no experience, has been put together by the Israelis and the Americans. It isn't up to the task, bearing in mind that there are 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza that need food. And the fact that they have to come almost every day to pick up food is absolutely dehumanizing and unacceptable. And the side that is causing this to happen is Israel, which claims that it hasn't killed children or women, hasn't, its policies haven't resulted in starvation. They all have. Every single humanitarian organization I hear speaking from Gaza or from Cairo, if they can't get in, or their spokesman, they all talk about Israel deliberately is deliberately using starvation as a weapon to control the Palestinians, because the ultimate aim is that, if we put ourselves in their position, if I have to run every day just to get a bit of food, what the heck is this life? I might as well leave. That's what they want them to think. But the Palestinians are so attached to their lands, unlike the settlers, which left their homes very quickly, rather than stick to the land that they claimed belongs to them.
Right. In fact, humanitarian organizations we've spoken to, including UNRWA, say that, the 21 or so truckloads of food coming in every day at the moment, it's about 1/30 of what's actually needed. So it's an interesting fact. And as an aside,
absolutely, it's a tiny amount. Plus this, even on the question of Hamas stealing the food, let's think of it this way. They claim Hamas is 30,000 to 50,000 strong. Israel claims it has killed 30,000. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that there are 10 to 20,000 who are still alive. Now, how much food do they need is the question. Now, if you look at the number that supposedly should be fed, it's 2.3 million. So in fact, they are starving 2.3 million in order to supposedly stop aid getting to the 20,000, when in fact, I haven't heard a single doctor or independent humanitarian person say that they've seen a single Hamas person or Islamic Jihad or whoever. This is why what Israel is doing is complete terrorism and is leading to a genocide. It is because it is using violence against the Palestinian people to achieve political aims. Anyone who will look at this in the dictionary will find that that's the absolute definition of terrorism.
Yeah, we're going to be speaking about definitions with one of our next guests in just a while. But just going back to the facts on the ground there are also these reports of people being fired at from helicopters, fired at by tanks. Do those sound credible to you?
I mean, since the beginning, this has been an Israeli war or attack on the Palestinian people, not simply on the ones they claim are Hamas members. And that just reconfirms it. Where we see pictures, I saw a video only the other day of what seems to be a quadcopter killing an elderly man who was just walking in almost an empty piece of land, splattering his body into pieces. Israel is committing crime after crime, all sorts, whether it's ethnic cleansing, whether it's crimes against humanity, whether it's any type of crime, including genocide. And don't listen to me on this, or your next guest who may be from Israel. Listen to Ehud Olmert and Ehud Barak speaking recently, only the last couple of days. Ehud Olmert says they are committing war crimes. And when he was asked whether Netanyahu should stand in front of The Hague, he said yes. So it is an Israeli former prime minister who is saying this, not Kamel Hawwash sitting in Birmingham.
Sure. We will be speaking to a scholar of international criminal law and genocide in just a moment. So definitely we will address those definitions that you also have raised there. I want to ask you some more political questions now about where we head to from here, because one thing that struck me is that during the course of the weekend, Israel refused to allow a delegation of Arab ministers to visit the West Bank. I don't know if you saw that, but what do you think the motivation is for not allowing, which I should add, included ministers from Saudi Arabia and other countries across the GCC? What's the Israeli motivation in not letting them into the West Bank, do you think?
In fact, I was a bit surprised at the delegation going, but only from the perspective that the Palestinians sometimes call non-Palestinians going home, and whether they have a foreign passport or not, that they consider what they do is a bit of normalization. So the fact that Israel wants a normalization with Saudi Arabia, that this delegation is led by the Saudi foreign minister, they should have let them in, and then they should have begun to see how they can extract themselves from Gaza and head towards real peace. In other words, this delegation was going in to support the Palestinian people by meeting their president and to ensure that they learn as much as they can about the situation. However, we know, we've heard it from almost every minister I've heard speak, that they are against the Palestinian state. In other words, they do not want the Palestinians to achieve any of their rights, and that is because they want to push them out and achieve a truly ethnically clean, if you like, Jewish state, i.e. Israel. Not only that, but to expand it by occupying parts of Syria and parts of Lebanon and so on. So it's very difficult to see how the two can meet unless there's a change of not just the narrative, but the real desire in Israel to achieve peace. After more than 70 years, Israel has not achieved peace. In other words, it's still, I wrote once in an article that its body is in Palestine, but its heart is in Europe. It hasn't quite made it to be accepted because it is such a criminal occupying state. Even before the 7th of October, it had killed 200 Palestinians in the West Bank. But since the 7th of October, it has absolutely attacked the Palestinians in the West Bank, where there is no Hamas, or it isn't in control. So I think the summary of this is Israel is intent on ethnically cleansing the Palestinians, thinking that that will make it more acceptable maybe to other states. But wherever the Palestinians go, they will always, like me, I have lived outside Palestine the whole of my life. I will never forget my roots, and I will never forget my people. And I try and do what I can every day to help the Palestinian people, because they must achieve their rights like any other people.
Yeah, it was quite interesting at the weekend to hear Israel announcing the creation of 22 new settlements in the West Bank. And as they were announced, the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, vowed to build what he called a Jewish Israeli state in Palestinian territory. I mean, it sounds as though Israel, correct me if I'm wrong, has never been so flagrant in its disregard for the whole idea of a Palestinian state. Is that how it sounds to you?
Well, absolutely. This is, again, a continuation of what's every time something, whatever happens, it uses it to say, I'm going to punish you by building more settlements, to the Palestinian people in particular. But in this case, it is very much, it seems it's fear that there are moves like from France, possibly the UK and other states to join Ireland and Spain and Norway and recognize a Palestinian state. Once that is recognized, even though it will be on paper, it makes it an occupied, illegally occupied United Nations state, so member state. So it wants to continue, and its extremist ministers want to continue along the path of Greater Israel. And the important thing for them next is the West Bank. And then when you hear the American ambassador, Huckabee, talking about addressing the French president and saying, well, basically, if you want to If you support a Palestinian state, why don't you have it in France? I mean, imagine these are the countries that supported Israel completely over the last few years, and that's what he says to him. And if anyone says to him, Mr. Huckabee, you, the Americans, have plenty of space, why don't you create Israel in America, will be accused of anti-Semitism. Look at the difference in terms of even thinking about that point of view. And that is because there is no accountability whatsoever. Another minister said, look, we kill Palestinians. If we kill 100 more, nobody cares. And that's the mentality that Israel can do whatever it wants, even if it pushed the Palestinians out of Gaza. Who's going to stand in its way, it feels, and therefore can do whatever it likes. And that is why we need to have accountability. But unfortunately, particularly the United States is not shifting quickly enough or strongly enough to make it feel accountable. And that's really where we are.
Okay, but Professor, let's not forget that, going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, that delegation of Arab nations ministers that wanted to visit the West Bank, again, something that Israel described as provocative. I'm not sure what you read into the word provocative with regards to that visit, but do you think perhaps Israel somehow underestimated the resolve from a number of Arab countries, and not only Arab countries, other countries around the world, with regards to the plight of the Palestinians?
Well, first of all, the reason it uses words like that about the visit, provocative, is it regards the whole of Palestine as its sovereign land, even though technically it doesn't have sovereignty according to its law on the West Bank. But the reality is the Arab League offered the Arab Initiative back in the year 2000, which would have recognized and accepted Israel on the 1967 border if it left the Golan Heights, etc., etc. But Israel is intent on expanding, and it has now ministers who are settlers who think that, and as we know, that Smotrich, when he visited France a couple of years ago, stood behind a map of Greater Israel, which included Jordan, parts of Syria, parts of Lebanon, parts of Saudi Arabia, and parts of Egypt. So we shouldn't take lessons from Israel about provocation when it's provoking the whole world. We see the demonstrations supporting the Palestinians. We see the fact that it is losing support even from for example, MPs in the UK who used to support Israel, who stood in parliament and said, I can't support this anymore, I condemn what it's doing. And it's because it's resorted, after all the criminality, to starving babies. The pictures we see of babies who don't have food formula even to survive are absolutely horrendous, and they are Israeli-made, not man-made, Israeli-made. That has to stop, because we all want to see an end to this, with the Palestinians realizing their rights as any other people.
Okay, well, we're going to have to end it there because we're out of time, but we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Professor Kamel Hawwash, thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.